Well, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar. What a good way to start the last Monday in January, and goodness me, it's been a long time coming, it feels, this year. I'm Sarah Davidson, Chief Executive at Carnegie UK, and we're here today to take a closer look at the data in our Life in the UK Index, and in particular to demonstrate the functionality of our new data dashboard, but also to take a slightly broader look at how data is used to measure well-being across the UK. I'm delighted to be joined online here by my colleague, Dr. Anna Francis, who developed the dashboard, and also by Vasiliki Sodia, who works in the Wellbeing Data team at the Office of National Statistics. And I'll introduce each of them a little bit more fully later on. There's going to be an opportunity to put questions to both Anna and Vasiliki, so please do submit these using the Q&A Zoom function. You'll see that at the bottom of the screen there. And don't feel you have to wait till the end for that. If anything inspires you or prompts you while listening to Anna and Vasiliki, please do drop your questions in and we'll come to them shortly. So Anna, could you please share the first slides now? Thank you. So for anyone here today who's new to us, Carnegie UK is an independent policy foundation which has been working on this mission to improve the well-being of the people of the UK and Ireland for well over a century now. At the moment, our strategic focus is on putting well-being at the heart of decision-making. And what that means in practice is working with governments at all levels across the UK and Ireland to help them think about how to embed well-being approaches into their policy governance. As most of you will appreciate, well-being is a term which has meant different things at different times in different places, and even now means different things in all sorts of different contexts. But this is how we currently define well-being, with an emphasis on the collective, thinking about all of us and the importance of addressing inequalities, but also with this important emphasis on understanding the implications of decisions now for the long-term future. So collective well-being. And we think about that collective well-being as having four distinct but linked dimensions: social, economic, environmental, and democratic. And this is at least in part used as a corrective to the traditional, very siloed approach to policy, which any of you who either work in governments or work closely with governments will recognise really gets in the way of taking a holistic view of policy. As I say, we've been at this for quite a long time, and inspired by the 2009 recommendations of the Stiglitz-Sen-Fitoussi Commission, as well as the work of lots of other people in this field. At Carnegie UK, we have advocated for a long time for measuring what matters and using those measurements to influence decisions about policy. And the Life in the UK Index is really our contribution to the debate about how to do that well. The index measures collective well-being across the UK and is based on what people in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales have told us about their lives, and it produces a single overall well-being score. The purpose of the index is to help governments across the UK focus their attention on what it is that really matters to people, and also to help us to understand whether people are collectively living better or worse over time. I want to draw out the key facts that are on the bottom of the slide here. Sorry, Ivan, if you could just pop back to the previous one there. Thanks. The key facts, the index is now in year 3, and at Carnegie UK, we've made a commitment to run the index at least till 2030. So we're in it for at least the medium-term haul. There's a sample size of around 7,000 each year, and that 26-question survey is run for us by Ipsos using their gold standard knowledge panel. We've got good survey sizes for England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, which enables us to produce separate reports for each of those jurisdictions. And we've always applied a booster to capture the experience of minority ethnic groups. The exciting thing about this year, the 2025 data, is that it now enables us to see multi-year trend and demographic analysis. And that's partly what's enabled us to do the work that Anna's going to be presenting in a moment. And we're going to be increasing the data visualization from now onwards. Thanks, Anna. So it's my fault for bouncing back and forward. Thanks very much. And just finally, this is the summary score for the 2025 index for the UK as a whole. You'll see that the wellbeing score for the UK in 2025 was 62 out of a possible 100, and that's an overall figure that's not changed in statistically significant terms since the first year of the index. If you've got exceptionally good eyesight, you'll see some footnotes on the slide there that explain that a number of the scores are statistically significant from 2023 or 2024, and all of that information is contained in the full report, which you can have a look at, and we'll be sharing links to that after the webinar. So I'm now going to properly introduce Anna. Dr. Anna Francis is a senior researcher here at Carnegie UK, focusing on data and insight, and with a particular interest in the Life in the UK index. She analyses our Life in the UK data and external data to generate insights into wellbeing across the whole of the UK and Ireland. She came to us from working at Asthma and Lung UK as a health data analyst, and she studied heart disease during her PhD at Cambridge. So Anna is no stranger to data. Anna, please tell us about the dashboard you've been working on, what that tells us about life in UK and where you're going from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's really nice to be with you all today. So I just want to give you a bit of an overview of what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And I'm really excited to be launching our Life in the UK data dashboard today. This is a project that I've been working on since I joined Carnegie back in June. So it's really great to get it out in the world and available for you all to play with today. This is the first time that we've been able to make our wellbeing data available in this fully interactive Life in the UK data dashboard, which makes it easier to explore and understand our wellbeing data. The dashboard offers an accessible visual way to understand our wellbeing data across the social, economic, environmental, and democratic aspects of life. This webinar will give you a tour of how to navigate the data dashboard, explore our 3-year trend data Sarah just mentioned, and compare wellbeing scores across jurisdictions and demographics. I will highlight some caveats to keep in mind, and I will signpost to supporting analysis and where you can find the full data tables. I'll also take a minute to tell you about the tool I use to create this dashboard, which is Data Wrapper. And I will talk about our next steps in terms of developing and enhancing the dashboard and our wider data visualization offer. We really hope that this will be a valuable tool providing clear, intuitive, and useful data for policymakers, researchers, and practitioners in the wellbeing space. So here is the Life in the UK data dashboard. This is available on our website. You will have received a link when you signed up for the webinar, and we'll be sending out the link again after the webinar. But for today's session, I've embedded the dashboard in PowerPoint to hopefully keep the tech gremlins happy. So fingers crossed. So as you can see, you can look at our data by any of the jurisdictions within the UK or UK overall. And as we mentioned, we've got quite a few demographic breakdowns. So you can look at the number of children people have, age, area deprivation, disability, education, ethnicity, gender, household income, religion, sexual orientation, tenure, or urbanity. And you can click on any of the blue buttons to search by that particular filter. This data will be updated on an annual basis. So as Sarah said, we run our 26 questions survey with Ipsos, and that happens in May each year. So the data will be updated every summer. So you can look by country, you can look by demographic, and then you can also look across our 4 domains of wellbeing and our overall collective wellbeing. There are also pages, so remember that you can flick through all the different pages. You can click on any of these headings to filter to organize by a particular heading, and you can search in the table for anything that you're particularly interested in. So I just want to highlight some caveats before we continue. Where base sizes are lower than 50 people, we have removed this data from the dashboard. Although we have really good sample sizes across the UK, once you start digging into the demographic groups, particularly in Wales and Northern Ireland, these numbers can be too small for a strong statistical analysis. However, this data can be found in the complete data tables at the bottom of the data dashboard, along with full statistical analysis of all the survey questions which sit behind the wellbeing scores. So you can see in this example that I've searched by those living in urban areas or their urbanity. So we're looking at people living in rural areas, and we're also looking at people who live in urban areas. So if we focus on this top row, you can see that in England, people living in rural areas scored 66 out of 100 in 2023. This remained flat in 2024, but has increased by 1 point in 2025 to become 67. We have included all of our data on this dashboard, so these changes may or may not be significant, and you just need to check the data tables to see which changes are significant. So that's just something to flag. So I've demonstrated how you can compare by year. You can also compare across the different wellbeing domains. So you can see that both social wellbeing and economic wellbeing score 76 out of 100 for those living in rural areas in England in 2025. However, for those in the social wellbeing category, this has declined by 1 point since 2023, and for those in the economic wellbeing domain, this has increased by 2 points since 2023. Environmental wellbeing sits at 71 out of 100, and this had a little blip in 2024, so has recovered since then. Democratic wellbeing sits at 43 out of 100, having increased by 1 point since 2023. These scores are much lower across the board, so those living in rural areas aren't particularly low on democratic wellbeing. This is seen across the board. So that shows you how you can explore by year and by wellbeing domain. You can then also compare to people living in urban areas. So you can see that those living in urban areas scored 61 out of 100, so lower than those living in rural areas. And you can see that this trend is the same across the wellbeing domains. So consistently, those in urban areas have lower wellbeing than those in rural areas. We can then also compare between countries as well. So you can see that while England scores 67, those in Northern Ireland in rural areas score 64, and those in Wales score 65, so both scoring lower than in England, whereas those living in rural areas in Scotland score higher at 68. So that's how you can explore by year, by wellbeing domain, by demographic, and by country. And you can also search very specific things. So say you wanted to look at age, but actually you're only interested in 16 to 34-year-olds. You can also just type that into the search bar as well to see that. So I wanted to take a minute to talk you through the tool that I've used to build this dashboard, and that is a tool called Data Wrapper. Data Wrapper is a simple, powerful web tool for creating accessible charts, maps, and tables, and doesn't require any coding skills. Only a little bit of HTML coding for personalization, such as fonts and colors and that kind of thing. But Data Wrapper has a really great resource called their Academy, which has lots of helpful articles and webinars to help you along the way. And I found it really useful and intuitive to use. Visualizations are responsive and easy to embed online and in PowerPoint, as you've seen today. Options are available to download the visualizations, export data, and share on social media. And they also have built-in color blindness checks and previews for different formats, such as mobile, desktop, and tablet. And it supports team collaboration, allowing multiple people to work on the same projects at the same time. And just to say, I promise Data Wrapper did not pay me to say any of this. I genuinely just love the tool. And this was all done with their free version. So you can upgrade to a premium version, which gives you enhanced branding. But we haven't found that we needed it because you can do so much with the free version. So I wanted to explore and show you what other cool things Data Wrapper can do. And one of them is maps, and I love maps just as much as the next person. So on your screen on the left-hand side, you can see a map of the UK with the regions of the UK showing collective wellbeing scores. And on the right-hand side, you can see also the UK with its regions showing social wellbeing scores. And maps are really there's there's a lot of different varieties of maps. You can choose whatever level you like, basically, which is super handy. And you can also click on any of the buttons for each of the domains to see those particular wellbeing domain scores. So now, just to show you what it looks like when you click on any of these regions. So the maps are interactive. So, for example, I've clicked on Yorkshire and Humber, and you can see its collective wellbeing score as well as the domain scores for the individual wellbeing domains and across the years. Where numbers are green, this shows that the wellbeing score was higher in previous years, and where numbers are red, where the score was lower in previous years. So you can get a real feel for how things have changed over time. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that we've digged in a bit deeper. So as Sarah mentioned, we have a 26-question survey that we do, which leads to our wellbeing scores. So this shows you that Yorkshire and Humber scores 72 out of 100 for social wellbeing, and then shows you the questions which contribute to that score. So for example, 62% in the area are in good health, 61% are in good mental health, and 25% don't feel safe walking alone in their neighbourhood after dark, and so on. And you can look at this across the UK. So just to flag that the map on the left-hand side, you can find in our Life in the UK report on the webpage, which I will highlight the link to at the end. The map on the right-hand side isn't up on our website yet. A version of this for Scotland was released in a blog I published last week, so you'll be able to see that. And I'm working on getting the England version out at the moment, so stay tuned for that. So I just want to talk through the next steps for our dashboard. So this is very much the beginning of our data visualization journey. This is not the finished product by any means. We're really looking to explore and enhance what we can put on the dashboard. So for example, I'd love to get the trends for those survey questions up there. And we want to explore different ways of presenting our data to make it as useful as possible for everyone to understand. And our data tables will be available on the UK Data Archive in due course. And we really want you to use this data in your work. So the point of getting the data out there is that it's useful and can be used by as many people as possible. So we really encourage you to dig into the data, play with it, use it in your work, obviously with appropriate references. But this data is more useful the more people use it. And finally, we would love your feedback. So any suggestions or recommendations in terms of tools, what you liked, what you didn't like, please get in touch. I always love talking about data visualization and I'm a bit of a nerd about it, so I'm always happy to chat. So I really hope you will find this a useful tool in your work. And I will now hand back to Sarah. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Anna. It's just great to see this all coming together after such a lot of work. And a reminder, please do pop questions in the Q&A. We've got a few coming in already. If you've been inspired by what Anna said, to ask any questions about the data and the use of Data Wrapper, please do ask. And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Vasiliki Soya. Vasiliki is a lead analyst at the Office of National Statistics, and she works there to make national wellbeing data meaningful and accessible. And in particular, and this is why we've had a good connection and good conversations with Vasiliki and her colleagues over the last year, she's working on the efforts to refine how we measure well-being in the UK at UK level. And I know from personal experience is passionate about using data to improve lives and inform better decisions. So Vasiliki, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And I think you're going to reflect on the wider concept of measuring collective well-being and the importance of data visualization. So I will hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Let me see if I can share my screen. Does this look okay? Can you see what I am sharing? Brilliant. So yes, good morning, everybody. I am Vasiliki Soya, as Sarah mentioned, from the Office for National Statistics. I am a lead analyst in the Quality of Life team, and this is the team that is responsible for measuring personal and national well-being at ONS. The team is particularly responsible for developing and updating the UK measures of national well-being, which is a framework and a dashboard that includes 60 measures split across 10 domains that measure how we're doing as individual, community, and nation, and how sustainable that is for the future. So this is sort of the key output from this team. And you've just seen how the Life in the UK Index brings together 3 years of data to measure collective wellbeing across the UK. But my aim today is to reflect on the wider challenges of measuring and presenting collective wellbeing, drawing on my experience of the ONS dashboard. And in particular, I'm going to be reflecting on the role of language, visualization, the role of language and visualization in making wellbeing data understandable, trusted, and usable. So I hope you find this useful and food for thought if you're doing similar work. So the challenge with national well-being is that it's not really measured through or collective well-being, it's not really measured through a single concept. Those of us working on measuring national well-being are always trying to synthesize a wide variety of data across different topics and disciplines, social, economic, environmental, democratic dimensions of well-being, objective and subjective data, different geographies, different frequencies, units, and time periods. As you can imagine, each of these comes with its own conventions and its own language. So one of the central challenges, and one that dashboards like Life in the UK directly confront, and our dashboard as well, is how to bring this complexity together without overwhelming users. And I think that's where visualization and language become more than just a presentation choice. They actually become an analytical decision. So to showcase the importance of language and to give you some examples from our work, I thought I would present our how we've approached presenting our personal wellbeing measures, which are a central component of how we understand national wellbeing. These measures ask people to assess aspects of their own lives, such as life satisfaction, worthwhileness, happiness, anxiety, etc., using a 0 to 10 scale. We actually found out that the mean, or I guess the single average score, doesn't really tell our users very much. So instead, we focused on showing the distribution of responses, and we grouped that scale, that 0 to 10 scale, into evidence-based thresholds, so low, medium, high, very high, or as you can see here, very low, low, medium, high. And that was based on analysis of how the population actually responded. So this helped users move beyond the technical averages and towards an understanding of how many people are doing well, how many are not. And it's that principle of prioritizing interpretation that underpins the way well-being measures are presented in our dashboard. Language becomes even more important when it comes to communicating change over time, which is something that I know colleagues from Carnegie reflected on in the previous presentation. At ONS, how we describe change has evolved over the years, and it has been driven by user feedback and testing. So we moved away from terms like increase and decline and towards terms like positive change and negative change. And the reason for that is simple, and it became really clear when we stepped out of what I would like to call the analytical bubble and started testing the dashboard with users. It's quite simple. An increase in anxiety is not good, while an increase in life satisfaction is. So by focusing on the sentiment rather than the direction of change, this allowed users to more easily compare trends across very different measures, which is something that dashboards covering collective well-being need to do well. And I think this is where the Carnegie product really hits the nail on the head. I think you do that very well from what I have seen so far. In terms of supporting users, we actually found out that when you're presenting dozens of indicators, charts alone are not enough. So at ONS and increasingly across other wellbeing dashboards internationally as well, this meant embedding support structures, things like definitions, glossaries, consistent color use, and intuitive filtering. These design choices reduced cognitive burden, and they made the dashboard usable for policymakers, researchers, practitioners, essentially people who may not be wellbeing specialists. And again, I think the Life in the UK dashboard does this well. It doesn't just show data; it actively helps users interpret it. So on the screen here, you can see an example of our definitions tool in the UK Measures of National Wellbeing dashboard, and an example of our filtering tool, where we filter by direction of change and by domain, so topic area effectively, and also the consistent colors. Negative change is red, positive change is green. I know, how novel. But it really helps people interpret our findings, especially because we've got 60 odd measures, and the messaging can get quite blurry unless you've got those principles. Another important lesson is that visualization approaches are not fixed. So at ONS, our wellbeing outputs have gone through multiple iterations, responding to accessibility regulations, to stakeholder feedback, to concerns about transparency, just all sorts of feedback from users as well. Now, in a minute, I'm going to take you through sort of screenshots of how we've evolved over the years in the hopes that this sort of will showcase the lessons learned. But I have to add a disclaimer that some of those screenshots are pretty low quality. Sadly, they're the only ones I have, or rather low resolution. I can't really go back to the previous iterations of the website to take better ones, so I apologize. But hopefully the message gets across. So when we established the personal subjective wellbeing questions, user research at the time showed that it was better to color code the questions and keep that consistent throughout all publications, to allow the reader to select and differentiate between the measures more easily. So you can see here we've got green for life satisfaction, purple for worthwhile, etc. In 2011, we started presenting our measures through a static wheel, which then adapted to an interactive wheel. And then as a consequence of changes in government accreditation for website accessibility, we moved to an interactive dashboard. And actually, we're on the third iteration of that now. So you'll see that the final product in a minute. In terms of assessing change, our interactive dashboard first assessed change using this column sort of visualization. It was, I think, our attempt to sort of synthesize our measures, which worked well enough, but we've improved on that. We have tested this is the screenshot that you're seeing now is from the latest version of the dashboard. And we have tested and used a combination of arrows, colors, language to communicate change over the years. In the latest iteration of the dashboard, we originally included arrows showing the direction of change, and we included a percentage point estimates right here. And we also included labels like negative change, etc. After conducting user research, actually, we found out that we were essentially doing too much with all of this, and we were confusing people with all of this information. So as a result of that, we dropped the arrows that were here and the percentage points, and just changed the assessment of change labels to negative and positive, and we're presenting things as you can see them on the screen now. So we've also adapted our filtering approach, which I've talked you through already. And we, in the presentation of our charts, have established criteria for data presentation consistency. So, for example, we've got a minimum data points for when we're presenting just numbers like this versus to when we're presenting bars to when we're moving on to line graphs. And then finally, outside of the dashboard, we also utilize maps, both static and interactive charts and infographics. I think reflecting on all of this, what has been at the core and what I would recommend should be at the core of every data visualization attempt is the user experience, and it's remembering that as analysts, we don't have the same experience as our users when we're interacting with our dashboards. So stepping out of that analytical bubble and actually engaging with the user base and understanding their needs is really what I think drives policy impact and ease of understanding. I guess I'll close with a couple of reflections, and I'll leave plenty of time for discussion. But dashboards like the Life in the UK and the UK Measures of National Wellbeing are not just technical products. I view them as a bridge between data and lived experience, between research and policy. So measuring collective well-being will always be complex, but I think careful attention to language, clarity, and accessibility means that we ensure that well-being data is not just published, but is genuinely understood and used. I mean, at ONS, we've been doing a lot of work at sort of looking at a headline set of indicators to sort of make some of that messaging even clearer for users, but I'm not here to talk about that, although I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat if there are any about that. But I just want to say thank you. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. I'm really passionate about this subject, so happy to answer any questions. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Vasiliki, and particularly maybe for that closing message, because that's something that we also think is incredibly important. It's not just measuring what matters, it's doing something with it. And I know that the work that you're doing with the UK government and work that we're doing with governments at all levels is very much around that question of how do you actually use this data to drive better decisions for better lives. So that was a really helpful point to end on. So thank you to everybody who has been populating the chat. We'll get through as many of these as we can with questions. Before we start, though, I was going to ask both of you, Anna and Vasiliki, maybe Anna first. Is there any data visualization done by anyone else that you've come across that has really inspired you or helped you to think about how to do this well? Maybe particularly thinking about that user interest that Vasiliki just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I certainly find sort of inspiration from the work that the King's Fund and the Health Foundation does on data visualization. Their visualizations are really clear and useful to use. So they've definitely helped me. Data Wrapper also does a weekly roundup of good data visualizations. So that's always really great to see and kind of get inspiration from what other people are doing. And they also have this feature where they take somebody's chart where they've asked for help with it and show you step by step how they've improved it, and seeing the thinking behind how to do that has really helped me improve my visualizations.
Thanks, Anna. And Vasiliki, anything that's particularly impressed you over time?
I think seeing how other countries present their national wellbeing dashboards, particularly I think the Netherlands with their interactive wheel. I know we used to have an iteration of it and we dropped it because of sort of accessibility concerns. But I do find the wheel quite powerful, sort of bringing together what is, I would argue, a vast amount of data. And I think this is the one that I always try and go back to, but I haven't found a way to make it accessible. But I know the Netherlands do it with their version of that dashboard. So I need to pick their brains about how they managed to make that accessible, because I do think this is a very powerful tool.
Yeah, thank you very much. So coming to questions in the chat here, I'm going to pick out first one from Kay Coster. Do the survey questions remain the same year by year? And do you have any consideration of what is a good score for each of the measures? And pointing out that there's categories at the 60s to 70s, but democratic well-being is around 40%. And that's obviously something that we have drawn a lot of attention to at Carnegie UK and had quite a lot of internal discussion about what a good score looks like. So Anna, I wonder if you'd like to say something about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the survey questions do stay the same every year. So it's 26 questions, and that allows us to track changes over time. So although we get interested and think, oh, that would be cool and that would be cool, we have to stick to those core sets of questions to keep it the same over time. Yeah, as Sarah says, what a good score is something that we talk a lot about in Carnegie, and whether it is actually possible to get to 100 and whether that is something we should be aiming for. Certainly democratic well-being is far lower than the other scores. As we've said, the other scores are in the 60s, 70s, but democratic well-being is really low. Something we did notice this year in England was that it increased significantly by one point, and we reckon that's because of local elections that had happened just before our survey went out last year, and so people having that sort of agency and ability to vote has actually increased people's democratic well-being because they feel like they have a voice in what's happening around them. Certainly, I've done a bit of sort of experimentation looking at how long it would take scores to reach 100, and it's not anytime soon. I think the closest one was in about 20 years, so still plenty of work for us to be doing.
And I think it's also worth emphasising, going back to our definition of collective well-being, that 100 doesn't represent gold plating. 100 represents possibly what Bhutan calls sufficiency. In other words, having what you need to live a good life with others. And I'm going to pick another question out that I think links really well to your answer to that last one. It's an anonymous question about whether or not 1% change is significant year on year, and likewise the 1% difference across the various regions and nations of the UK. And the questioner is saying, do those not seem a bit small to say much given statistical error and standard deviations? So what's the thought about whether or not this actually gives us enough insight into change to be actionable?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, one point changes can be significant. It depends obviously on the sample size. And yeah, although it's not sort of, as Sarah just said, in terms of being actionable, it's more seeing trends over time and whether they're increasing or decreasing over time. And so the fact that we've got this project is definitely running until 2030, that gives us a chance to see whether things are improving or declining over time, and how governments are doing and how that reflects within our data. So it's definitely something that yeah, we're looking at, and it will become more powerful the more trend data we have.
Thanks very much, Anna. Vasiliki, a question specifically for you here about the presentation of ONS data. Gary Walsh is asking if you could explain a bit more about the reasoning for using the terms positive and negative change instead of increased and decreased well-being that you referred to.
For sure, yeah. So I think I hinted at that in the presentation, but I can expand on it. So effectively, the way that we were presenting change, or the change labels that we were using before we moved to positive and negative change, was having an increase and decrease, so indicating the direction of change, and then arrows on the side as well, to make that even clearer. What we found was, for measures like life satisfaction, for instance, an increase obviously was a positive change, but an increase in anxiety levels was objectively a negative change for the nation. And when we went to users with that and we said, we're using the same labels to describe two very different concepts and two very different, what's the word I'm looking for? Two very different sort of directions of change. Is that clear to you? And effectively, they basically said no. So using the same label of increase to describe an increase in life satisfaction and an increase in anxiety just wasn't getting the message across, and it wasn't allowing users to be able to quickly understand whether that was a positive or a negative thing overall for the country. So switching to positive and negative change has allowed us to make that message much clearer and make the ease of understanding of our data just that much better. And we've had really positive feedback. It was something we really, because obviously we would have to label ourselves whether that is a positive or a negative change. So it's something that at the end of the day, obviously for clear-cut subjects like anxiety, where you can easily say, okay, an increase in anxiety is a bad thing. But there are some other measures in our dashboard that are maybe not so clear-cut, whether an increase or a decrease is a good thing or a bad thing. That was what we were wondering. Well, is that on us to say? But eventually we managed to agree, and enough user research to agree on sort of how we're going to be labeling everything. And like I say, it has been positively. It's been a positive change. It's been well received by users. So yeah.
Thanks for that fuller explanation. Anna, a couple of questions now, which I'm going to bundle together because they're on the similar theme, which is about the lower level of geographies that data is available at. So a couple of questions from Jeremy Martineau specifically about Wales and the extent to which you can see into population areas smaller than Wales itself. And also a question about the extent to which the lowest geography that the data is reliable at. So do you want to say a little bit about that, those data zone questions that you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have all the data available at UK level, at nation level. We have regions within England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, but unfortunately, we don't have any data available at lower levels within Wales currently. Yeah.
One of the projects you may be aware of that Carnegie UK did in our last strategic approach was a project called Understanding Welsh Places, where we worked with the Welsh Government and with Wizard in Wales to build a map of data in Wales. And one of the things we're interested in relation to life in the UK is how governments, but also not just governments, people working in the third sector and elsewhere can put together a jigsaw of different data at different levels, which obviously gives a rich picture for local areas about what's really going on. And of course, administrative data can be brought into that as well. It's one of the things we're really interested to learn more about is how life in the UK data could be put alongside other data sets to become really useful for policymakers and others. So be really interested to hear if anyone's got any thoughts about that. Vasiliki, I'm going to maybe ask you to comment first on this, and then Anna, although the question is essentially about life in the UK, uh, uh, in that. So the question is about the design of the survey and how the questions were chosen. I'll come to Anna in a moment on that. But there's a specific question of why they don't include the life satisfaction question that I know have been a key part of the ONS data set for many years. So I'm going to say something, invite Anna to say something in a moment about how that fits within our thinking. But I just wondered how you see the life satisfaction survey questions sitting within the wider ONS wellbeing dashboard and how you want policymakers to think about those as part of the wider set, because I know they've had a lot of prominence in recent years.
Absolutely. So I guess it depends on who you ask. Obviously, there's a group of academics who could argue that life satisfaction is actually the North Star and really should be sitting at the top of every well-being dashboard because we are asking people to assess their life and that encompasses all of the other aspects that are being mentioned in any well-being dashboard. And I know some countries that do position it at the top. In terms of how we think about it, we don't like to make we don't like to put it at the top necessarily as sort of a North Star as explicitly, but we do like to think of life satisfaction alongside the other three subjective well-being questions, so anxiety and sense of life being worthwhile and happiness, in conjunction to sort of tell a story about how subjective of individual subjective well-being. The reality is that internationally the discussion is moving fast about what should and shouldn't be in a well-being dashboard and how to best measure it and how to have consistency across countries and comparability. We're actually expecting the UN high-level expert group report on Beyond GDP to come out at the end of February, which might recommend, for instance, that life satisfaction sits at the top of that pyramid. So I would say we would be aligning ourselves to those recommendations. But personally, I have a soft spot for life satisfaction. I do think it's a really useful insight and a way of interpreting the dashboard data more efficiently by having that at the top. But that's just my personal opinion. And I think I would say officially, let's wait and see what that UN report comes out with. But I do find it a super interesting variable to look at.
And Anna, would you like to comment on that and also on how the original questions for Life in the UK were selected? Do feel free to throw a bit of that back at me, given that predated your time with us, if there's anything that I can add to that.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'll do my best. So the questions were designed with Ipsos a few years ago. So we started the survey in 2023, and there were lots of questions that got whittled down in the end to our core 26. And certainly a lot of the thinking that went into the index was looking at sort of all these different domains of well-being. So like we've mentioned, the environmental, the democratic, the economic and the social, to kind of get this wide holistic picture of how people are doing, so that we've got a really rich insight into how people are doing and what matters to them. Yeah, Sarah, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah. So I think just two things. The questions, as Anna indicated, were all ones which had been already tested. So we were not making up questions. And to an extent, of course, wanting to use questions that had already been tested meant that limited slightly the field that we could draw on. And I think in relation to the personal subjective wellbeing questions, we've very much taken interest in that debate. Our emphasis on inequalities and addressing inequalities and on thinking about collective wellbeing is what has tipped us away from putting those at the top of our pyramid, to use Vasiliki's example. But we're also really interested in exploring and understanding more about what the relationship is between what the subjective well-being scores tell us is going on, particularly in place-based approach, and what the Life in the UK scores tell us, and what is the connection between those. So we're hoping to do a bit more work on that over the next few years. Another question for Anna first here, from Catherine Manning, who's noting that the methodology report is published, but wondering whether the data itself is available and published anywhere, such as through the Understanding Society data or the ONS. So do you want to say a little bit about where the data is going to be available?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So all the reports are available on our website, and the full data tables that Ipsos provides us with that we use to build those reports and both the dashboard are available to download on our data dashboard webpage. So that's all there. You can see the questions that we ask in there. You can see all the demographic breakdowns, numbers of people, percentages, statistical significance, base sizes, yeah, all of that is available there. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we do hope to have the data available up on the UK Data Archive in due course. And just to say that we're really open about other people using our survey questions. We want it to be out there for people to use. So I noticed somebody said, would they be able to use the survey questions? Absolutely. We would love you to use them. We would love to hear how you get on with them, how you're measuring well-being in your area. Just building this really rich picture of how people are doing is, yeah, really interesting. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Alan. Just to reiterate that this is very much a learning process for us, and we're really interested to know how the question sets land in other places. So if you'd like to discuss that with us, as Anna says, please do get in touch. Question here, I'm going to come to you, Vasiliki, first on, which is on accessibility, which is something that you talked about. And it's actually really a question about audience. The questioner, anonymous questioner, noting that would present data differently depending on the level of data literacy that you're assuming. So the question really is, who are you looking to address? Is it primarily for local and national policymakers who probably have a higher level of data literacy, or is it genuinely for citizens who are interested in understanding what the data is telling us about well-being? And how do you reach judgments about your audience?
Yeah, I think this hits a nail on the head. This is something that we have been, I think, to be honest, it's not unique to this product, to ONS's work. Is generally something that anyone and any organization or country that is developing a dashboard or a framework like this has to grapple with. Who is your audience? Who are your users? Who is this for? And for us, the answer is we have multiple user groups and multiple different user needs that we need to address with all of our products. And I would argue it's impossible to fulfill all of those with just the one product. So the way that we have tried to balance this is by having multiple different versions of the product doing similar things. So I would argue that the dashboard is intended to reach the I guess the average citizen. It doesn't require much data literacy to engage with and to understand. But alongside that, we publish full data tables for whoever would like to do their own digging in data. We publish a synthesis article that almost brings those messages together of sort of what the key findings of the dashboard and other beyond GDP sort of publications that ONS publishes together to sort of say, hey, how are we doing in this country outside of key economic indicators? Let's look at that. And also with the addition of headline indicators, which we'll be publishing in February, we're trying to make the dashboard even more user-friendly. And I think it's an everlasting struggle to try and keep all of the users happy and all of the users able to understand. But I think it all starts with understanding who these users are And I think it's something that every organization and government department and country needs to do for itself. Is a bit of research on who your user base is, and then tailor your products accordingly. So
Thank you.
yeah.
And Anna, would you just like to say a little bit about the audience that you have in mind when you've been building the dashboard?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with Vasiliki that one product can't work for all audiences. It just doesn't, it's just impossible. So our dashboard is designed and targeted mainly at policymakers, researchers, and practitioners within the field who can then use this data within their work. So not designed at the public as such. But we hope that our reports are in a bit more of an accessible format for people to use, not quite as data heavy. So for people who aren't as data literate, that's probably a better format for them. But as I said, we're at the very start of our data visualization journey. So, we will be developing lots of different products for different audiences and aim to have something similar to what Vasiliki has at ONS in terms of different products for different audiences so that everyone can get something out of what we do.
Thanks, Anna. A question very specifically on Life in UK data about young people, young people's data. And again, one of the things that has been really interesting to look at has been the age demographic over time. So this is pointing out that for the person who's asking the question, data for 16 to 24-year-olds is more useful than the wider cohort. So the question is about what is the reason for the sample size? What's the reason for age ranges? Is it sample size? And are we in a position to break that down further? And if so, would we consider doing so?
Yeah, sure. So yes, in a nutshell, it is sample size. The reason that we have it as, so our three groups are 16 to 34, 35 to 54, and then 55 plus. And the reason for that is sample size primarily. We do have within the data tables, you can see breakdowns a bit further. So you're welcome to go and look at those if you want. But we will be sticking to those for our sort of public results again to keep that consistency over time.
Thanks very much. That's just bringing us almost to the end of our time now. Before we finish, I was just going to pick up one last question because it helps me link to the last thing I wanted to say. And this is a question about how third sector organisations could use the data to address the causes and effects of the wellbeing gaps and issues that are identified. And the reason I picked that out is because it is an example of something that we're really keen to encourage and support at Carnegie UK. For example, before the first year of data that we published, we identified that there were particular issues for those living with a disability, and we shared that data with third sector organisations which exist to support people with disabilities and to advocate for them. And we recognise that as an endowed foundation, we're able to produce this data and give it away for free, bluntly, and that, of course, that type of research can often be beyond the means of particularly small third sector organisations. So that's very much the way that we want to work, to make the data available and to help with interpretation of that for organisations whose mission is to advance the interests of those who are possibly furthest from experiencing collective well-being. And if anyone on the call would like to hear more about that, we'd be delighted to hear from you. I want to close by thanking both Anna and Vasiliki for their presentations and for being so open and answering all the questions. We didn't get to all of them, but we will follow any others up afterwards. And if anyone had a question they didn't manage to either ask or to develop, please do get in touch with us. As Anna already mentioned, we'll be following this webinar up with an email to everybody who registered, and that will contain all the links to the various documents and websites that have been mentioned today. And I do encourage you to have a play around, particularly with the data dashboard, and to let us have any feedback about how useful it is and ways that it could be improved. We're really keen to collaborate with people on this, not just the policymakers who we would like to use the data, but also if any of you are data visualization geeks, then we want to hear from you as well. We would ultimately love to be part of a community of practice with people like ONS who are trying to do this well, to understand their audiences and to present information as possible. So if that's you, we'd love to hear from you. That just remains for me to close the webinar, to wish you all the best for the rest of this Monday, this week, and for your work for the year ahead. Thank you very much. Goodbye.